Previously on HITC Sport. Newcastle must sack Steve Bruce. If Newcastle aren't careful, that's what's going to happen here, and at a time where relegation could be catastrophic. Yet again, Mike Ashley is gambling the future of Newcastle United by sticking by a manager who never should have been appointed in the first place. Steve Bruce has to go, but the sad reality is that he's going nowhere. How the is this cabbage still in a job? Hello and welcome to HITC Sport, and for the second time in 2021 we are doing a video about why Newcastle need to sack Steve Bruce, because things have got also more appalling since part 1. Christ, I can just see myself doing part 415 of this video to absolutely no one because YouTube will be obsolete in 10 years time. Anyway, part 1 of this video came back in January when Newcastle United were beaten 1-0 by bottom of the league Sheffield United, handing the Blades their first win of the season. Steve Bruce's mighty Mags rocked up at Bramall Lane with a flat back 5, Paul Dummett as a wing back, and Ryan Fraser and Sean Longstaff playing as false 10s. 2 months on, I still haven't got a clue what a false 10 is. But all I do know is that since that day, Newcastle United have picked up just 9 points, which has been somehow enough to keep them outside the relegation zone. The Magpies have been in freefall since before Christmas, back when the fans already knew that he wasn't the right man for the job. We all saw what was coming. We could see Newcastle hurtling towards the relegation zone faster than your League One uncle when he finds out Papa John's have got a sale on 2-for-1 pizzas. Before we go any further, I've got a favour to ask you. If you haven't already, please check out and smash the subscribe button on our Lexpo. I'll pop a link in the description below. We're nearly at 30,000 subscribers, so if you love Football Manager, or just like hearing from me, then I would absolutely love it if you could check it out. Anyway, back to today's video. But while Newcastle fans fumed at Bruce and his unique brand of football, pundits all over the country basically just said, "What are you complaining about? Steve Bruce is doing a class job. I used to drink with him in the Red Lion and he's a sound bloke." As time has gone by, the comparisons to Rafa Benitez have completely disappeared, simply because Bruce can no longer come close to the record of the Champions League winner. Right now, Bruce isn't even fit to fold up Rafa Benitez's glasses and put them in his top pocket for him. Ooh, that'll be funny. That's been awful. As results have gotten worse, the noises from pundits have changed, with a record of just 2 wins in 20 games, leading to some saying, maybe we were wrong about Steve Bruce after all. Anyway, coming up on TalkSport, why PSG should sign Ronaldo and Lionel Messi this summer, and we've got an exclusive interview with famous Arsenal fan and all-out delight, Piers Morgan. In a season where fans haven't been allowed in grounds, Newcastle fans have struggled to let their feelings be known. Instead, it just exists in the echo chamber that is Twitter, with fans being branded as keyboard warriors and trolls for daring to criticise the manager. The fact of the matter is that if St James's Park was open, it would be a chorus of boos and a sea of flying salad until the manager got handed his P45. Toon fans have had to settle for Twitter hashtags and furious podcasts. We're just one loss away from an organised protest on LinkedIn and an angry Bruce Out campaign on Bebo. Not too angry though, otherwise the government will fine you. Newcastle fans haven't been able to put proper pressure on the club. Meanwhile, the media are only just starting to wake up. But then you've still got people like Gary Neville who are claiming that Mike Ashley's the real problem and you can't just sack a manager after a few months. I mean, yes, Mike Ashley is still the problem in the long run, but we're kind of stuck with him until he resolves his issues in the courtroom. But more on that later. And claiming you've got to give managers time is a little rich coming from the guy who sacked more bosses at Salford than he scored goals in his career. But then again, anything to get another series of the class of 92. Between some pundits coming around to Bruce's failures to others turning a blind eye because they're Bruce's friend. Hello again, Micah Richards. Newcastle have been left in a relegation battle that is going to end in disappointment. Unless Fulham suddenly forget how to play football and go back to the days when the defence was so leaky a plumber couldn't fix it, they seem destined to get above Newcastle and survive. And if not, it'll come down to the final day when Newcastle head to Craven Cottage in front of thousands of fans, both teams fighting for a place in the Premier League. Thank goodness the pubs will be open by then. Since part 1 of why Bruce should go, a lot has changed at Newcastle. Bruce claimed the gloves were off and he'd do things his way, a new coach has arrived, a new system's been brought in, multiple key players have been injured, Richie called the manager a coward, while the club lost a High Court ruling ahead of their impending arbitration case against the Premier League. While the gloves apparently came off after the embarrassment against Sheffield United like some sort of weird Michael Jackson tribute, what followed was 3 straight defeats against Arsenal, Aston Villa and Leeds. So after claiming he was going to go all Frank Sinatra and do things his way, Newcastle continued to underperform and struggle to mount any kind of attack against any opposition. Just a couple of questions. 1, after 18 months, why hasn't the manager been doing things his way? And 2, if this is his way, what on earth was he trying to achieve? Then came the arrival of Graeme Jones. Never has the appointment of a new coach caused so much of a stir. It would be like us employing an editor or someone to do the thumbnails, only to do a huge reveal video on the channel. But while Jones' arrival was strange, his impact was immediate. Despite not winning any of their 11 last games, Newcastle went to Carlo Ancelotti's Everton and absolutely smashed them. This wasn't just to sit back and grab a goal on the break, Newcastle absolutely dominated against the Toffees. They had a new style, a new system, and it was actually pleasant to watch. It was the first time in the Steve Bruce era that I've actually enjoyed 90 minutes of football. This looked like it could be the start of a new dawn, with Bruce and Jones taking Newcastle back to the top, or just not as close to the bottom. That would have done, to be honest. But instead, Newcastle have won just one game since then, and that was the 3-2 triumph against Southampton, where the end of the game looked more like something from the Alamo. In that game, Newcastle lost Callum Wilson to injury, then a few weeks later they lost Miguel Almiron and Alan Saint-Maximin. One of the least attacking teams in the Premier League suddenly had their three best attackers filling up the physio's room. Newcastle's horrible injury record suddenly coincided with a very winnable string of games, including a trip to the Hawthorns against West Brom. But rather than change the system to the players that he had fit, Bruce stuck by the style that won him 2 games. The only issue is this time that he didn't really have a striker playing. At times we've had Joe Linton stood on one wing wondering what £40 million actually is, while Dwight Gale stands in the other wondering why Steve Bruce wanks him off so much in the media despite never really playing him. It's been square pegs and round holes, as Newcastle merely settle for draws rather than trying to win games. But James, I hear you cry, Man City don't play a striker and they're fine. Well yes, that is true, but they're square pegs cast in gold and falls into a bottom pit of money, coached by one of the best managers in world football, not a bloke who wrote crime novels in the past. Speaking of things that are embarrassingly bad, that brings us to Newcastle's 1-1 draw with Wolves. The Magpies had the lead but were forced into changes, with Emil Kraft picking up an injury. Newcastle didn't have another right back available, so Steve Bruce sent on Matt Ritchie with a list of instructions longer than a 5-year-old's Christmas list. Before Ritchie could get on and tell everyone what they suddenly needed to do, play resumed, chaos ensued, and no one had a clue what the hell they were doing. Wolves exploited the space from the confusion and immediately made it 1-1. After the game, Bruce literally blamed everyone but himself. Ritchie didn't get the instructions on quick enough, Lewis didn't stop the cross, the keeper could have done better. If Bruce had chatted for much longer, he'd have blamed Emil Kraft for getting injured and pointed the finger at the groundsman for having the floodlights too bright. Then came the reports of a training ground bust-up. According to the Daily Mail, Ritchie and Bruce had come to blows, with the winger calling the manager a coward for the way he handled the aftermath of the draw with Wolves. There was disruption in the camp, with the kind of drama you don't even get on EastEnders nowadays. Days later, and Ritchie was proven right, as Steve Bruce took his side to the Hawthorns to play one of the worst teams in the division this season and simply settled for a 0-0 draw. It was embarrassing, and Matt Ritchie hasn't played since. The Brighton game was the tip of the iceberg for many, as Newcastle went to the Amex to take on Brighton in a huge relegation 6-pointer without any clue how on earth they were actually going to win the game. In the end, they didn't win, suffering an embarrassing 3-0 defeat to Brighton for the second time this season. Steve Bruce's side have conceded 6 goals this season to a team that can barely finish the dinner most weeks. Yet there was Neil Maupay with spaghetti slopped all the way down his top to wrap up a 3-0 thumping of a team that they're apparently trying to compete with to stay in the division. It's so clear that the manager has lost the dressing room. The players on the pitch didn't look up to it, while the bench consisted of Matt Ritchie, who'd called the boss a coward, Andy Carroll and Dwight Gale, who stormed off after once again not being allowed to play, and Sean Longstaff, a man who's been shunned completely alongside his little brother. Yet here we are, days after the Brighton defeat, and Steve Bruce is going absolutely nowhere. Ashley is standing by his manager despite a record of just 2 wins in 20 games. In most clubs, that would get you the sack. If you're underperforming in your job, someone's going to have words with you. But down at Newcastle, you get a pat on the back and a few extra days off holiday. Over the international break, Newcastle have got the perfect chance to put things right. Even if they don't sack Steve Bruce, get on the training ground and work out how on earth he's going to find a way to actually win some football games. But instead, Bruce has given the lads 6 days off. It's no wonder the football's so incohesive. Alan Saint-Maximin probably rocks up to St James's Park every week, wondering who on earth is that bloke with the long hair who keeps passing the ball backwards every time he gets it. Standing by Bruce is absolute madness, and the fact he won't even walk away just shows that he's not really bothered about the club. He just wants his payoff. This is a bloke who's banged on about being a Geordie and knowing what it means to the fans, even though he spent most of his career flipping and flapping between rivalries like a scummy lad texting 10 lasses at a time. He was a Newcastle fan but managed Sunderland. He managed Sunderland but then goes to Newcastle. He worked for Birmingham City, then went to Villa. He's been the Sheffield United boss but had no issues going to Sheffield Wednesday. This man knows nothing about loyalty, and based on the performances, this man knows nothing about tactics either, or even getting the best out of the players he's got at his disposal. And it's not like there aren't better options out there at the minute. Chris Wilder's available, Eddie Howe. Both of these would be better than what they've got. Even Rafa's available. Although to be honest, I think he'd sooner be seen in an Everton shirt than working for Mike Ashley again. Christ, even just give it to Graeme Jones for the rest of the season. Anything to spark some kind of change at the club. Yet Mike Ashley is doing the unthinkable and standing by Steve Bruce, even though he's clearly taking Newcastle down to the Championship. And considering Mike Ashley wants £305 million of Saudi cash in his pocket, his stance makes even less sense. The Newcastle owner is embroiled in a legal battle with the Premier League as he looks to salvage a deal that could turn Newcastle into one of the richest clubs in the entire world. He's going to extreme lengths to get this deal done, and in his words, give the fans what they deserve. But it's just good PR. If he was really bothered about giving the fans what they deserve, he wouldn't be the most hated man in the North East over the past 10 years. All he's bothered about is getting Amanda Staveley's cash firmly in his pocket. He's so invested in this takeover that he can't say that the club are heading down to the Championship for the third time under his ownership. And if that does happen, he can kiss goodbye to his £300 million takeover. The Magpies have got 9 games to save this season, and at the minute I can't see any way that Steve Bruce is capable of doing that job. So I'm saying it for the second time in months. Newcastle and Steve Bruce need to part ways. Whether he's sacked or whether he resigns, this has to be the end. But sadly, it doesn't look like it's going to be. It's not nice to see someone should lose the job. But in turn, Steve Bruce's incompetence is going to take Newcastle down to the Championship. If that happens, various people at the club will lose their job, and I can guarantee they're not on as much money. At a time when the country is on its knees financially, these people can't afford to be queuing up at the job centre. They've got mortgages, bills, they've got kids to fund, they've got mouths to feed. The Magpies are heading down to the Championship under Steve Bruce, yet Mike Ashley sits by idly doing absolutely nothing. Newcastle United, the place where logic, hope and ambition goes to die. So there we have it, that's my thoughts on the current situation at Newcastle United. If you want to read any more of my thoughts, you can check out my articles on jollybootboys.com. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. As always, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to HITC Sport. And until next time, we will see you around.